Caleb Flynn is no longer just the grieving pastor or the former American Idol contestant. He is the prime suspect sitting in a Miami County jail cell on a $2 million bond. He claims a random intruder broke into his home and murdered his wife, Ashley. But while he was sobbing on the 911 call, investigators were already seeing the cracks in his performance. They say this was not a burglary gone wrong, it was a staged crime scene designed to fool us all. But Caleb made mistakes. Big ones. I have identified 5 specific contradictions in his story that expose this deception for exactly what it is. From a heavy refrigerator that supposedly moved itself to a father who knew too much about the bullets but cared too little about his own children. So, to get to the truth, I have analyzed the arrest affidavits and that chilling call. I want to walk you through these 5 points of failure so we can discuss them together. Because once you see them, you cannot unsee the lie. Let's start right at the beginning of the investigation, at the very moment the police arrived at the Flynn residence on Cunningham Court. It is the middle of the night. It is dark. The atmosphere is chaotic because you have a husband, Caleb Flynn, who is absolutely frantic. He is telling the responding officers a story that, on the surface, sounds terrifying but plausible. He tells them that a stranger, a burglar, broke into their home and killed his wife, Ashley. Now, in any burglary investigation, the first thing detectives look for is the point of entry. If someone broke in, they had to get in somehow, right? They look for shattered glass, a pry bar mark on a window, or a kicked-in door. Caleb was very helpful with this. He directed the officers' attention specifically to the garage. He told them that the intruder had entered through the side door of the garage. This makes sense initially. Side doors are often the weak points in a home security setup. They are usually less visible from the street. Maybe the lock isn't as strong as the front door. So, the detectives go to the garage to verify this claim. They expect to see a broken lock or maybe a door left wide open swinging in the wind. The thing is, when the police actually walked into that garage and looked at the specific door Caleb pointed out, the side door on the north side of the home, they found something that stopped them in their tracks. They did not find a broken lock. They did not find an empty doorway. Instead, they found a large refrigerator standing directly in front of that door. I am not talking about a small dorm room mini fridge that you could kick out of the way with your foot. The police affidavits describe this as a large refrigerator. This is a heavy, bulky appliance. And it wasn't just near the door, it was positioned right in front of it, effectively barricading it from the inside. This is where the story starts to fall apart, not because of a confession, but because of basic physics. According to the court documents, the police noted that this refrigerator was so heavy and so large that it would have had to be physically moved, pushed with significant force, just to get the door open. Which means, for Caleb's story about a break-in to be true, we have to believe a sequence of events that is completely illogical. We have to believe that an intruder approached the house from the outside. They somehow knew this door was the way in, even though it was blocked. Then, while standing outside, they managed to generate enough force to push a heavy refrigerator that was sitting on the inside of the door, sliding it across the floor, just to create a gap big enough to squeeze through. But it gets even more unbelievable when you think about the exit. Caleb claimed the intruder came in and then fled. So, let's play this out. The killer enters, pushing the fridge aside. They go into the house, commit this horrific crime against Ashley, and then they leave. If they left through that same door, the fridge would still be pushed aside, right? It would be in the middle of the garage floor, showing exactly where the killer forced their way in. But that is not what the police found. The refrigerator was in place. So, are we supposed to believe that a fleeing murderer, in a panic after shooting a woman 2 times, took the time to stop at the exit? That they thought, wait, I better tidy up before I go, and then pulled a heavy refrigerator back into place to block the door again. And how would they even do that? If you are leaving, you are on the outside. You cannot pull a refrigerator flush against a door from the outside. The handle is on the inside. The weight is on the inside. This detail is what investigators call a staged scene. It is when someone tries to make a crime look like something it is not, but they make a mistake because they are acting out a script in their head rather than reacting to reality. Caleb needed a story about an intruder, so he picked a door. But he forgot that the refrigerator made that door impossible to use without leaving a massive, heavy trace. And this brings me to a question I need you to answer. I want you to really think about the mindset of a criminal breaking into a home. Let me ask you this. Put yourself in the shoes of an intruder. You have just committed a capital crime. You are terrified of getting caught. The adrenaline is pumping. You are running for your life. Do you stop to rearrange the furniture? Do you take precious seconds to push a heavy appliance back against the wall to make the garage look neat? Does that make any sense to you? Or does it sound like someone staged the scene but forgot about the fridge? Let me know what you think in the comments. Is this just a detail the police are overanalyzing, or is this the moment the lie was exposed? So, let's stay in that garage for a moment longer. We have already talked about the refrigerator blocking the door, which is a massive physical impossibility in Caleb's story. But if you look past that appliance, you find another detail that the police zeroed in on immediately. It involves Caleb's vehicle. Parked inside that garage was Caleb's 2024 Ford pickup truck. Now, according to Caleb's version of events, this wasn't just a parked car. It was the source of the murder weapon. When investigators looked inside the vehicle, they found the center console, the storage compartment between the driver and passenger seats, was wide open. It wasn't just unlatched, it was left open for anyone to see. Caleb told the police that this was exactly where he kept his handgun. Specifically, he told them he kept a 9mm pistol in that console. But when the police looked inside that open console, it was empty. The gun was gone. At the same time, inside the master bedroom where Ashley Flynn lay dead, crime scene technicians were collecting evidence. They found shell casings on the floor near the foot of the bed. And guess what caliber those casings were? They were 9mm. So, here is the narrative Caleb is asking the detectives and us to believe. He is asking us to believe that an intruder managed to squeeze past a blocked door, entered the garage, and then, for some reason, decided to rummage through the truck. This intruder apparently did not bring a gun of their own. They were unarmed. But then, in a stroke of incredible luck for the killer and terrible luck for Ashley, this unarmed burglar opened the console, found a loaded 9mm handgun, and then decided to escalate a simple burglary into an execution-style murder inside the house. Police and criminology experts, like retired Detective Matt Irvine, have pointed out how incredibly unlikely this scenario is. Think about the mindset of a burglar. Most people who break into homes are looking for quick cash, jewelry, or electronics. They want to get in and get out. If they are the violent type who is willing to kill homeowners, they almost always bring their own weapon. They do not enter a strange house, empty-handed, hoping that the homeowner has left a loaded weapon in an unlocked car for them to use. That is a level of risk that simply does not happen in the real world. Furthermore, why was the console left wide open? If a thief steals something, they grab it and go. They don't necessarily take the time to pose the scene. But in this garage, the console was left gaping open, almost as if it was being displayed. It draws the eye. It screams, "Look here. This is where the gun was." In other words, the open console acts less like the aftermath of a frantic search and more like a stage prop. It looks like an invitation. It looks like someone wanted to make sure the police connected the dots immediately. The gun was here, now it is gone, so the bad guy must have taken it. It is too perfect. It is too convenient. It solves the problem of, where did the murder weapon come from? A little too neatly for a chaotic, middle-of-the-night home invasion. Investigators call this staging. When a stranger kills someone, they don't need to stage the scene because there is nothing connecting them to the victim. They just leave. The only time you see a scene manipulated like this, with doors propped open and consoles displayed, is when the person who committed the crime needs to divert suspicion away from themselves. Caleb needed a reason for his gun to be the murder weapon, so he created a story where a thief stole it. But in doing so, he created a scenario that defies criminal logic. And this brings me to a question I need you to answer, and I want you to be honest. You are seeing this through the eyes of the jury now. Do you believe that a killer would break into a house with no weapon, empty-handed, just hoping that the homeowner has left a loaded gun in a truck for them to use? Is that just incredibly bad luck for Caleb, or is that bad planning on his part? Now, we have to talk about the most chilling piece of evidence in this entire case. It is not something physical like the refrigerator or the missing gun. It is the voice of Caleb Flynn himself. The 911 call he placed at 2:30 in the morning on February 16th is, in my opinion, the moment the mask started to slip. When we listen to emergency calls, especially those involving the death of a loved one, we usually hear raw, unfiltered panic. We hear chaos. But most importantly, we hear a plea for help. If you walked into your bedroom and found your spouse shot, your brain would likely short-circuit. You would scream, "Help her. She is not breathing. Send an ambulance." You would be hyper-focused on the victim and their immediate survival. But that is not how Caleb Flynn started his call. Instead of a plea for help, Caleb offered a narrative. His very first sentence to the dispatcher was, "Oh my God, somebody broke into my home and shot my wife." The reason this matters is that innocent people do not typically start by explaining the crime. They start by trying to reverse the tragedy. By immediately declaring, "Somebody broke in," Caleb was not asking for medical assistance, he was establishing his defense. He was planting the seed of the intruder before the police even turned on their sirens. He wasn't acting like a husband trying to save a life, he was acting like a suspect trying to sell a story. And as the call progressed, this selling became even more obvious. Throughout the recording, Caleb repeatedly mentions details that the dispatcher did not ask for. Specifically, he keeps bringing up the garage door. He says, "The door to the garage was wide open." He mentions it again later, ensuring the dispatcher notes that the entry point was open. Why is he so fixated on a door when his wife is dying in the next room? A grieving, terrified husband should be holding his wife's hand or checking her pulse, not giving a tour of the home's security failures. But Caleb needed the police to know exactly how the bad guy got in. He was directing the investigation from the phone, making sure the intruder theory was the first thing on the record. Retired Detective Matt Irvine noted that when someone provides information that was not asked for, especially in a crisis, it is a massive red flag that they are reciting a script they wrote in their head. And this is important because we have to talk about the tone. This is subjective, sure, but thousands of people who have listened to this call have said the same thing. It sounds like a performance. It sounds like overacting. Caleb is breathless. He is sobbing. His voice hits these incredibly high pitches. It is so extreme, so theatrical, that it actually confused the professional on the other end of the line. During the call, the dispatcher, who is trained to handle hysterical people, repeatedly refers to Caleb as "Mom." Not once but multiple times. Think about that for a second. Caleb is a man, but his performance of grief was so exaggerated, so high-pitched and frantic, that the dispatcher couldn't even identify his gender correctly. It breaks the reality of the moment. It suggests that Caleb was trying so hard to sound devastated that he overshot the mark and landed in the uncanny valley of fake emotion. He wasn't reacting. He was projecting what he thought a grieving husband should sound like. When you combine the storytelling, opening, the obsession with the open door, and the theatrical sobbing, the call stops sounding like a tragedy and starts sounding like a bad audition tape. So, I want to turn this over to you, because you have heard the clips. I want you to listen to his voice in your head. Does that sound like genuine, earth-shattering grief to you? Or does it sound like someone who is trying way too hard to sound devastated because they know the police are recording every word? Is this a man in shock, or is this a man in character? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Now, we arrive at the most heartbreaking and arguably the most damning aspect of Caleb Flynn's story. It is not about the physics of a refrigerator or the logic of a missing gun. It is about instinct. It is about the primal, biological drive to protect one's offspring. And this is where Caleb's narrative completely collapses under the weight of human nature. Inside that house on Cunningham Court, there were two other people besides Caleb and Ashley. Their two young daughters were sleeping in a bedroom down the hall. Throughout the 911 call, Caleb places himself in the master bedroom, right next to his wife's body. He is describing the blood. He is describing the open doors. He is painting this vivid picture of a home invasion in progress. He tells the dispatcher that a stranger, a violent criminal armed with a 9mm handgun, has just violated the sanctity of their home and executed his wife. But, and this is the part that makes your stomach turn, he stays in that room. For minutes, while he is sobbing and explaining the garage door situation to the operator, he does not move toward his children. He tells the dispatcher, "My daughters are in their room." He even makes the confusing claim, "I was with the children when it happened." Yet in the same breath says, "They're not even awake." Think about the implications of that statement. 2 gunshots have just gone off inside a quiet suburban home at 2:30 in the morning. Gunshots are deafeningly loud in an enclosed space. And yet, Caleb is confident enough to tell the police, without checking, that his children are still asleep and that they are fine. How could he possibly know that? If there is an intruder in your house, and you do not know where they are, your brain screams one thing: get to the kids. You do not know if the killer has fled. You do not know if they are walking down the hallway toward the children's room. You do not know if the children are hiding under their beds in terror. In a genuine home invasion, a parent's only priority is to put their body between the danger and their children. They would be running down that hallway, weapon or no weapon, to barricade that door. But Caleb did not do that. He was so unconcerned about their immediate safety that the 911 dispatcher actually had to order him to do it. On the recording, you hear the dispatcher ask, "The juveniles, are they okay? Have you checked on them?" Caleb admits, "I haven't checked on." The dispatcher, realizing the absurdity of this, has to explicitly instruct him, "I need you to go check on the juveniles for me." Only then does Caleb seem to move, and even when he supposedly checks on them, he comes back to the phone almost immediately to report that they are still sleeping. Which tells us something terrifying about Caleb's state of mind. He was not afraid for his children because, deep down, he knew there was nothing to be afraid of. He knew there was no dark figure lurking in the hallway. He knew there was no intruder who might decide to leave no witnesses. He knew exactly where the gun was, and he knew exactly who had fired it. The reason he felt safe enough to stand in his bedroom and talk to the police, instead of rushing to shield his daughters, is that he knew the only dangerous person in that house was himself. His subconscious betrayed him. By acting as if the threat had completely neutralized itself the moment Ashley died, he revealed that the threat was never random. A random burglar is unpredictable. A random burglar is a loose cannon. You do not assume a random burglar has left your children alone. You only assume that if you control the narrative, Caleb Flynn failed the most basic test of parenthood that night. He failed to act like a father whose family was under attack. Instead, he acted like a man who was waiting for the police to arrive so he could start his performance. And this brings me to a question I need you to answer, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. If you are lying in bed and you hear gunshots inside your own home, what is your very first move? Do you reach for your phone to call 911 and explain that the garage door is open? Or do you run to your children's room to make sure they are still breathing? Be honest, what is your instinct? Finally, we arrive at the fifth red flag, and this is the one that really sends shivers down your spine because it deals with the impossible physics of sight. We have talked about the heavy refrigerator, the missing gun, the theatrical performance, and the strange indifference toward his children. But there is one specific sentence Caleb Flynn said in the very first moments of that 911 call that might be the nail in the coffin for his defense. It happened right at the beginning. Caleb is on the phone, frantic, supposedly having just discovered his wife's body. He tells the dispatcher, quote, "She's got 2 shots to her head." Now, on the surface, that sounds like a description of the injury. But let's pause and really think about the environment Caleb was standing in. According to the police reports and the timestamp on the call, it was approximately 2:30 in the morning. It was the dead of night. The house was dark. The bedroom where Ashley lay was pitch black or, at best, dimly lit by streetlights filtering through blinds. What happened next was, investigators started looking at that statement and comparing it to the reality of the crime scene. When a person is shot in the head, especially at close range with a 9mm handgun, it is a gruesome, chaotic scene. There is a significant amount of blood. There is trauma. Hair becomes matted and obscured by fluids. Even trained paramedics and forensic pathologists often have to clean a wound or move the body into bright, clinical lighting just to determine how many entry wounds there are versus exit wounds, or even just to distinguish a gunshot wound from blunt force trauma in a bloody field. Yet, Caleb Flynn, in the dark, in a state of alleged panic and shock, was able to diagnose the exact number of wounds and their precise location within seconds of walking into the room. He did not say, "She is bleeding." He did not say, "She is hurt." He did not say, "I think she has been shot." He said, specifically, 2 shots. How could he possibly know that? If he had just walked in and found her, all he would see is a tragedy. He would see blood. He would see his wife unresponsive. He would not see a math equation. To count the bullet holes, he would have had to get close, inspect the wounds through the blood and hair, and do so with a flashlight or by turning on the main lights, which would contradict his frantic, fearful demeanor of a man worried about an intruder still being in the house. The problem is, specific details are often the enemy of lies. In psychology, we often see that when people are fabricating a story, they try to make it sound more credible by adding precise details. They think that by saying, 2 shots, instead of, "She is shot," they sound more observant, more helpful. But in reality, they are revealing information they should not have. The only way a person knows exactly how many bullets are in a victim's head in a dark room without inspecting the body is if they were the one who put them there. Caleb knew there were 2 shots because he pulled the trigger 2 times. He didn't need to see the wounds to count them. He counted the recoil of the gun in his hand. He counted the muzzle flashes in the dark. That knowledge did not come from his eyes. It came from his memory of the act itself. This is what detectives call guilty knowledge. It is information that only the perpetrator would know. By volunteering that specific number so early in the call, before the police even arrived, Caleb wasn't describing what he saw, he was confessing what he did. He was reciting the facts of the murder he had just committed, forgetting that a grieving husband discovering the body would be too blinded by tears and darkness to count bullet holes. It is a detail that seems small, but when you pull on that thread, the entire tapestry of the burglary falls apart. It suggests that the darkness of that room wasn't a hindrance to Caleb, because he didn't need light to know what he had done. And this brings me to a question I need you to answer. I want you to imagine that horrific scenario. If you walked into a dark bedroom and found your spouse unresponsive and bleeding, would you be able to instantly tell the 911 operator exactly how many times they had been shot? Would you have the presence of mind to count the wounds? Or would you just see the blood? We have spent a lot of time looking at the how. We have looked at the refrigerator that defied physics, the gun that vanished into thin air, and a 911 call that sounded more like a screenplay than a cry for help. The evidence, at least from the perspective of the investigators, points squarely at Caleb Flynn. But whenever I cover a case like this, there is always one nagging question that keeps us up at night. Why? Why would a man who seemingly had it all throw it away? Caleb Flynn was not a career criminal. He was a man who had spent his life building a very specific, very polished image. He was a former worship leader and a musical pastor. He was a contestant on American Idol Season 12, where he told the world, "I love the Lord, and I love my wife more than anything." He and Ashley were the picture-perfect couple, college sweethearts from Lee University who built a life on faith and family in a quiet cul-de-sac in Tipp City. So, what drives a man like that to allegedly pick up a 9mm handgun and execute the mother of his children while they sleep down the hall? From there, we have to look at the unique pressures of the world Caleb lived in. We have to look at the intersection of reputation, religion, and narcissism. In many devout religious communities, the family unit is not just a social structure, it is a testimony. A failed marriage is not just a personal misfortune, it can be viewed as a spiritual failure or a sin. Divorce is messy. It involves dividing assets, admitting that the perfect life was a lie, and facing the judgment of the congregation. For a man who thrived on public validation, someone who went on national television to sing and praise his very pretty wife, the stigma of divorce might have felt like a death sentence for his ego. Retired Detective Matt Irvine pointed out something profound in his analysis of this case. He noted that in some of these family annihilator cases, the perpetrator feels trapped by the institution of marriage. They may want to leave. They may have found someone else. They may just be tired of the life they built. But the parameters of their religion or their social standing make divorce an unacceptable option. In their twisted logic, being a widower is preferable to being a divorcee. A widower gets sympathy. A widower gets casseroles brought to his door. A widower gets to keep the house, the money, and the full control of the children. A divorcee gets alimony payments and weekend visitation. And that brings us to the most chilling potential motive, control. When Caleb stood before the judge, crying about his bond, he didn't say, "I want to find who killed my wife." He said, "I just want to take care of my daughters." It sounds noble, but in the context of a murder charge, it sounds like a man terrified of losing control. If he divorces Ashley, he loses half of his time with those girls. If he eliminates Ashley, he remains the sole authority in their lives. This leads us to the comparison that has been making the rounds in legal circles and online forums. People are already calling this the second Scott Peterson case. Scott Peterson was another man who seemingly had it all, the looks, the charm, the beautiful wife. But he wanted out. Instead of filing paperwork, he murdered Lassie Peterson and tried to blame a random burglary or abduction. The similarities here are striking. Like Peterson, Caleb Flynn allegedly tried to sell the story of a burglary gone wrong. In a safe neighborhood, he tried to create an invisible intruder to take the fall for his desire to escape his life. The invisible intruder is the oldest trick in the book because it plays on our fears. We all want to believe that the danger is outside the house, lurking in the dark. We do not want to believe that the danger is sleeping next to us. Caleb Flynn was banking on that fear. He was banking on the community seeing him as the grieving pastor, the victim of a cruel world, rather than the architect of his own wife's destruction. But the mask slipped. The investigation suggests that this was not a crime of passion, but a crime of calculation. He didn't just snap, he staged a scene. He moved a refrigerator. He opened a console. He wrote a script. That requires a level of coldness that contradicts every word he ever sang in church. So, I have to ask you, because motives are rarely simple. We know he is charged with murder, but we are still piecing together the why. What do you think was the real driving force here? Was it money? Was it the pressure of maintaining a perfect religious image? Was there another woman we haven't heard about yet, or was it just a cold, narcissistic desire to be free, without the stigma of divorce? Let me know your theory in the comments. Is this Scott Peterson all over again? So, here we are at the end of the evidence, but certainly not the end of the story. We have walked through the garage door that was blocked by a refrigerator. We have looked into the empty center console of a truck. We have listened to a 911 call that sounded more like a performance than a plea for help. We have witnessed a father who stayed on the phone instead of rushing to his children. And we have questioned how a man in the dark could count bullet holes he shouldn't have been able to see. Looking at this case, what struck me wasn't just the brutality, but the arrogance. The arrogance to think that moving a fridge or opening a truck console could fool seasoned detectives. I started questioning how many times we've seen this perfect family mask slip, revealing something so dark underneath. Caleb Flynn spent years on stages, in church, on American Idol, cultivating an image of a man who loved God and loved his family. But when the pressure was on, he treated a murder investigation like just another stage, thinking he could direct the lighting and the props. What he didn't realize is that forensic science doesn't applaud, it calculates. When you take those 5 red flags we discussed, the fridge, the gun, the script, the kids, and the vision, and you stack them on top of each other, they cease to be just clues. They become a steel cage. They form a trap that Caleb Flynn built for himself, bar by bar, with every clumsy attempt to stage the scene. The sheer clumsiness of it all is, in many ways, the clearest verdict we could ask for before the trial even begins. And this brings us to the lessons that this case forces us to confront. First, and this is something investigators know well but we often forget, the crime scene does not lie. Testimony can change. Memories can fade. Tears can be faked. A lawyer can spin a narrative in court, but a large refrigerator weighing hundreds of pounds does not have an agenda. It cannot be coerced into moving itself. When the physical reality of a room contradicts the story being told by the survivor, the physics will win every single time. Caleb tried to write a story, but he forgot to check the continuity of his own set design. Second, and perhaps more hauntingly, is the lesson on intuition and safety. The most difficult thing to fake in this world is a primal instinct. We are biologically wired to protect our offspring. It is a survival mechanism that overrides fear, logic, and self-preservation. When a parent goes against that basic instinct, when they prioritize a phone call over the lives of their sleeping children during an active shooter situation, that is the loudest warning siren you will ever hear. It tells us that the fear isn't real. It tells us that the danger is controlled. Caleb Flynn is currently sitting in jail, having pleaded not guilty. His defense attorney is already using the rush to judgment strategy, claiming the police focused on the husband too quickly. But based on what we have seen, the police didn't rush, they just looked at the refrigerator. So, I have to ask you, do you believe Caleb will eventually confess when faced with the absurdity of his own story? Or will he continue to play the role of the grieving, wrongfully accused widower all the way to the verdict? We are left with a final, tragic image. Ashley Flynn was a beloved teacher, a coach, and a mother. She went to sleep in her own bed, in her own home, in a quiet cul-de-sac where neighbors trusted each other. She was in the one place where she was supposed to be safest. And the person who was supposed to be the last line of defense against the world, the man who vowed to protect her, was the one who ended it. According to the charges, he didn't fail to protect her from the darkness. He became the darkness. He opened the door, not for a burglar, but for his own demons to step inside. And now, 2 little girls have to grow up knowing that the monster wasn't hiding under the bed. He was sleeping in the room next door.